in Space.
This podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get your first free audiobook on us and start your free trial by going to audibletrial.com/todayInSpace. Don't sit in traffic stewing in stress for no reason. Use that time to learn something new or at least entertain yourself. Head over to audibletrial.com/todayInSpace to get started. This podcast is also brought to you by AG 3D Printing. Learn about 3D printing from us and also get a free quote for your next project, product idea, or gift for yourself or others by going to ag3d-printing.com or emailing us at ag3d.engineering@gmail.com. AG3D helps fund the Today in Space podcast, so support us by watching our videos, sharing with friends, or investigating in our 3D printing and design services. All of that helps support the podcast, keep the lights on, and keep it coming every episode. This past week, I had the opportunity to take a week off and go on vacation in Hawaii on the island of Oahu to go to a friend's wedding. Both Sarah and I took this as an opportunity to take some time off and give us both a much-needed break from our busy lives. This time away was so valuable, I can't help but spend an episode on the importance of taking the time to rest up, recharge, and unplug from the world for a little bit. I want to make a point of talking about this as I'm not very good at taking breaks from work. If you haven't caught on, I'm a bit of a workaholic and can very easily work myself into the ground. The thing I'm still trying to work on is making time to actually rest and not just watch a movie or be on my phone as a break from the noise of everyday life. It's not easy. So this was kind of a big deal, taking a week off from everything. It was glorious. I really enjoyed myself, was able to see some friends get married on Waimanalo Beach, and was able to unwind. That being said, I didn't do it gracefully. It took me at least 2 whole days for my brain to simply reset and not be in work mode. I noticed this at night when I would try to go to bed or when I was sleeping. My mind would just race and I couldn't get it to stop until I was so exhausted, I finally went to bed. I also noticed that if I woke up in the middle of the night, my mind would go, "It's time to think," and my brain would launch into a thought or idea, and it would take a lot of effort to get my brain to slow down enough to go back to bed. It was also amazing to notice how unproductively critical I was being of myself and my work in the last few months, both creatively and technically. I do have the ability to go very big picture and create and be creative, and then go very granular and be critical of the really tiny details. It's part of the reason why I think I'm able to do a science podcast like this. But if I don't take time to balance those two things, the creative and the critical side, and leave enough room for both, I get short and start becoming critical of myself and waste a lot of energy doing that. That's usually my go-to, to beat myself up, but that's part of my balance. I have learned so much, though, from doing this podcast and getting feedback from you, the listeners and viewers. While I may be stubborn, I have slowly evolved over time and have made a real effort to be less of a perfectionist, or more specifically, less of a lazy perfectionist. By which I mean that younger me in college and even high school was very critical about the things that I wanted to do, especially music or science projects. And I felt if I couldn't do it perfectly or by the super critical and unrealistic standards I had in my head, then it would never get done. What I've learned from the podcast is that it's more important to get something out there and finish it instead of creating something that's perfect, a masterpiece. It's actually something I picked up from how SpaceX has developed over time. When I watched SpaceX develop their first stage landing technology, recovering Falcon 9s, I would see them do something new every launch. It was, even though every time they were focused on the mission of delivering a paying customers' payload to orbit. They tried something new every time. Did it work every time? Hell no. In fact, I remember there was a period where almost every launch had something new changed based on how well or how poorly the last launch performed. I started doing that with the podcast and saw really great change and growth, both in the quality of the podcast and in myself. But being me and being human, even this amazing process of growth and change can easily become just another way for me to work myself into the ground. So through much stubbornness and stress, I realized that if I don't give myself actual rest, I can't successfully improve. It actually prevents me from getting better. The value of taking that break and taking the time to reset, recharge, and unplug is it allows you to reset and reflect, or at least get away from the grind. If you're in a technical field or you have a demanding job or you just are a human in the 21st century that uses technology every day, it's so important to take time to get away from it. If you don't, you end up like me, slowly becoming more stressed and more critical of yourself instead of always looking for a way to improve and seeing that what's already in front of you. It's amazing what you'll miss with a stressed out mind. As great as it was to take a week off from work, I realized that not everyone is able to take that time away from work. For the last decade, I didn't have that opportunity, so I get it. First, it was trying to finish my last credits in my aerospace engineering degree. That was like when I first started the podcast to graduate. And then it was finding a job and working there long enough to build time off for a vacation while also barely being able to meet loan payments for the month. Never mind be able to pay for a vacation. And then I was building both companies today in space and AG3D printing so that they grow to be self-sustaining. And so I get it if you're listening and you're saying, that's easy for you to say. I've been there. But after taking this time off and allowing myself to be on vacation, even though it took a few days, I was happier, less stressed, and way less critical of the tiny stuff in my life and work that really doesn't matter. It's like my brain chemistry has reset and I'm ready to get back in the game and do my best work. And there's a lot to discuss. Progress on the Space Launch System and Orion is underway with the crew abort test being set up in Florida. Luckily, the current presidential administration has funded the SLS so it can continue. Confusingly, the president recently made a remark on Twitter, as he does, that seems to contradict his previous position. Not that long ago, the president signed the Space Initiative to fund NASA's Moon to Mars initiative. Under my administration, we are restoring NASA to greatness, and we are going back to the Moon and then Mars. I am updating my budget to include an additional $1.6 billion so that we can return to space in a big way. Then I was on vacation, and I noticed he tweeted, "For all the money we are spending, NASA should not be talking about going to the moon. We did that 50 years ago. They should be focused on the much bigger things we are doing, including Mars, of which the moon is a part, defense, and science." So I think pre-vacation me might have been frustrated by this, but post-vacation me sees it as kind of funny, especially considering that NASA's already funded for the Moon to Mars mission. So does it really matter that the president contradicted himself in a tweet about NASA? No, it doesn't. In other news, SpaceX and Elon Musk got a lot of pushback online from some members of the scientific community, specifically astronomers, as they believe the Starlink constellation, when in full effect, will prevent land-based viewing of the stars and hold up space science, astronomy specifically. I did some research online, and you can see a great video by Astronomy Live in this episode's description or on this episode's link on todayinspace.net. You'll see what the full 14,000 satellite constellation, I think it's 14,000, it's a lot of satellites, and what those satellite constellations will do to muddy the viewing waters of space. For a lot of the folks around the world, it will be okay, and those satellites will not cause many issues. While in other places like the UK, they may have a big impact. Pre-vacation Alex may have just said, well, SpaceX is screwing up viewing space. Way to go. But instead, after a bit more research, I saw that Elon Musk was having some great discussions with other space enthusiasts on ways to work around this and make sure that there are no stalls in ground-based astronomy. I also found a press release from the National Science Foundation, who has been working with SpaceX since they started working on Starlink, apparently, to prevent any kind of lapses in astronomy. This is an excerpt from the National Science Foundation that came out not that long ago, and it says, quote, "After working closely with SpaceX, the NSF has finalized a coordination agreement to ensure the company's Starlink satellite network plans will meet international radio astronomy protection standards, limiting interference in this radio astronomy band. Additionally, NSF and SpaceX will continue to explore methods to further protect radio astronomy. Together, we are setting the stage for a successful partnership between the commercial and public endeavors that allows important science research to flourish alongside satellite communication." And I think this is where taking a break and actually resting can make a huge difference in our 21st century lives. How many times have you heard something in the news or from someone about something happening in the world? It seems catastrophic and almost like the world is ending, and you spend all that time and energy stressing and worrying only for it to either be not true or be a non-issue. How many times have you been burned on an overreaction? Probably a lot. I know I have. So I think the big lesson for me this week was that if you don't rest and take time to get away from the insanity of life, the more you get caught up in the things that don't matter. So for your own sanity, find a way to separate yourself from the grind of life, even if that means you only find a few minutes during the day, even if that means meditating for a few minutes in the morning like I do, or working out first thing to release all that pent-up anxiety and worry. Do it. It will make a huge difference. With that said, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you again for joining us. As always, you can get your free audiobook and trial by going to audibletrial.com/todayinspace. You can also learn more about 3D printing by going to ag3d-printing.com. Get a free quote on your next project. Follow us on Instagram. That's right, we're on Instagram now at Today in Space Pod, and our 3D printing at AG3D Printing. You can follow us on Facebook at Today in Space Pod and AG3D Printing, and subscribe to the YouTube channels for Today in Space and AG3D Printing. And obviously, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to get the audio version of all these podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much everywhere else. We're still working on Spotify. Thank you. Have a great week. Spread love, spread science. See you next time.